The air in Grove Psychiatric Hospital was thick with secrets. It clung to the patients like a shroud, muffling their cries and whispers. But there was one patient whose silence echoed louder than any scream. Alicia Berenson, once a renowned painter, was now an enigma wrapped in a tragedy. 6 years ago, Alicia had shot her husband Gabriel 5 times in the face. Then she swallowed a bottle of pills and retreated into a world of silence. She hadn't spoken a word since. Her motive remained a mystery, a puzzle that captivated and frustrated investigators. Alicia's silence was a canvas onto which people projected their own interpretations. Some believed she was mad, driven to violence by an unseen force. Others whispered that she was a cold-blooded killer, hiding behind a facade of insanity. But no one knew the truth, no one but Alicia, and she wasn't telling. Theo Faber, a criminal psychotherapist, was drawn to Alicia's case like a moth to a flame. He was convinced that he could break through her silence, unravel the secrets hidden within her mind. He'd spent his career listening to the darkest confessions, delving into the recesses of the human psyche. Alicia's silence was a challenge he couldn't resist. His first encounter with Alicia was unsettling. She sat in the common room, her face a beautiful, expressionless mask. Her eyes, however, were alive with a suppressed intensity. They followed his every move, watching, judging. When he spoke to her, she didn't react. It was as if he didn't exist. Theo was undeterred. He requested a transfer to Grove, determined to gain Alicia's trust. He pored over her case files, studying her life before the tragedy. He learned of her troubled childhood, her artistic talent, her passionate love affair with Gabriel. And he became more convinced that Alicia's silence held the key to a truth more complex and disturbing than anyone could imagine. Alicia's life had been a tapestry woven with beauty and darkness. From a young age, she was acutely aware of the duality that existed within her world. Her days were filled with moments of joy and creativity, but they were also shadowed by an ever-present sense of melancholy. Her childhood was marred by her mother's suicide, a tragic event that left an indelible mark on her soul. The loss was profound, and it cast a long shadow over her formative years. Alicia often found herself staring at old photographs, trying to piece together the fragments of a happier time. This event left her emotionally scarred, creating a void that she struggled to fill. The pain was a constant companion, a silent specter that haunted her every step. She often retreated into herself, finding solace in the quiet corners of her mind. Art became her refuge, a way to express the emotions she couldn't articulate. Each brushstroke was a release, a way to channel her inner turmoil into something tangible. Her paintings were a window into her soul, revealing the depths of her pain and the flickers of hope that still remained. She met Gabriel at art school, and their connection was instant and intense. He was drawn to her enigmatic aura, and she found comfort in his unwavering support. Their love blossomed amidst the vibrant colors and creative energy of the studio. He became her muse, his love a lifeline in her turbulent world. Gabriel's presence brought a sense of stability that Alicia had longed for. Together they created a sanctuary where their artistic spirits could thrive. But their marriage was not a fairy tale. Beneath the surface, cracks began to form. The pressures of life and the weight of their past started to take a toll. Arguments became more frequent, and the once vibrant connection began to fade. Gabriel, a successful photographer, was often distant, consumed by his work. His passion for photography, which had initially brought them together, now seemed to drive a wedge between them. He spent long hours in his studio, leaving Alicia to navigate her own emotional labyrinth. Alicia, increasingly isolated in their grand home, spiraled into depression. The walls that once echoed with laughter now felt like a prison. She wandered through the empty rooms, her mind a maze of sorrow and confusion. She felt suffocated, her voice silenced by Gabriel's domineering personality. His need for control and perfection left little room for her to express her own needs and desires. The love that once uplifted her now felt like a chain, binding her to a life of unspoken misery. Her paintings, once vibrant and full of life, became dark and disturbing, reflecting the turmoil within her. The canvases that had once been her escape now mirrored her inner chaos. Each piece was a cry for help, a desperate attempt to make sense of her unraveling world. Then, there was the miscarriage. The loss of their child was a blow from which Alicia never fully recovered. The dreams of a family, of a future filled with love and laughter, were shattered in an instant. The loss of their child devastated Alicia, pushing her further into despair. She spent countless hours in the empty nursery, clutching the baby blanket and weeping for the life that would never be. The grief was a heavy burden, one that she carried alone. Gabriel, unable to cope with her grief, retreated further into himself. He became a ghost in their home, present in body but absent in spirit. The distance between them grew, an unbridgeable chasm that neither knew how to cross. The cracks in their marriage widened, threatening to swallow them whole. The love that had once been their anchor now felt like a distant memory. They were two souls adrift, lost in a sea of pain and misunderstanding. It was during this time that the mysterious phone calls began, a sinister presence that whispered threats and fueled Alicia's paranoia. The calls were a chilling reminder that her past was never truly behind her, a sinister presence that whispered threats and fueled Alicia's paranoia. Each ring of the phone sent shivers down her spine, the voice on the other end a haunting echo of her deepest fears. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, leaving her trapped in a waking horror. Weeks turned into months, and Theo's dedication to Alicia's case bordered on obsession. He spent countless hours poring over medical journals, consulting with specialists, and researching every possible treatment that could bring her back. His life revolved around finding a way to reach her, to break through the silence that had enveloped her. He visited her daily, talking to her, reading her excerpts from her favorite books, playing her music. Each visit was a ritual, a testament to his unwavering hope. He would sit by her side, recounting stories from their past, hoping to spark a memory, a reaction, anything that would indicate she was still there with him. He refused to give up, clinging to the belief that beneath her silence, Alicia was listening. He would hold her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin, and speak to her as if she could respond at any moment. His determination was unyielding, fueled by the love he had for her and the memories they shared. He saw flickers of recognition in her eyes, the slightest twitch of her lips that hinted at a response. These small signs, though fleeting, were enough to keep his hope alive. He would replay these moments in his mind, convincing himself that they were real, that Alicia was fighting to come back to him. Then one day, a breakthrough. It was a moment that Theo had been waiting for, a moment that seemed to validate all his efforts and sacrifices. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, like a ray of light piercing through the darkness. Theo brought Alicia a sketchbook and a set of charcoals, hoping to rekindle her passion for art. He remembered how much she loved to draw, how it was her way of expressing herself. He hoped that by giving her these tools, he could reach a part of her that words and music could not. He placed them on the table in front of her, his heart pounding with anticipation. He watched her intently, every muscle in his body tense with hope and fear. Would she respond? Would this be the key to unlocking the door that kept her trapped? For a moment, nothing happened. The silence in the room was almost unbearable, the weight of his expectations pressing down on him. He held his breath, waiting for any sign of movement, any indication that she had noticed the sketchbook and charcoals. Alicia remained motionless, her gaze fixed on the art supplies. It was as if time had stopped, and the world had narrowed down to this single moment. Theo's heart ached with the fear that he had failed, that this too would be another futile attempt. Then, slowly, she reached for the charcoal. The movement was almost imperceptible at first, a slight twitch of her fingers. But as her hand moved closer to the charcoal, Theo's hope surged. He leaned forward, his eyes wide with anticipation. Her hand trembled as she brought the charcoal to the paper. The effort seemed monumental, as if she were fighting against an invisible force. Theo watched, his breath caught in his throat as she began to draw. Each stroke of the charcoal was a victory, a testament to her will to communicate. The silence in the room was deafening as she began to draw. Theo could hear the sound of the charcoal scratching against the paper, a sound that filled him with a mixture of hope and fear. He watched her intently, his heart pounding in his chest as a single word began to take form on the page. Theo watched, his breath catching in his throat as a single word took form on the page. A name. Alcestis. The name was written with a shaky hand, but it was unmistakable. It was a name that held deep meaning, a name that spoke of hope and resurrection. It was the name of a woman from Greek mythology who was brought back from the dead, Alcestis, who had sacrificed herself for her husband and was later rescued from the underworld. The name was a symbol of hope, a sign that Alicia was fighting to come back to him. It was a small victory, a whisper in the darkness, but for Theo, it was everything. It was proof that Alicia was still in there, that she was trying to reach out to him. The name Alcestis was a beacon of hope, a sign that their love could overcome even the darkest of times. But for Theo, it was everything. It was a moment of triumph, a moment that validated all his efforts and sacrifices. He felt a surge of relief and joy, knowing that Alicia was still fighting, still trying to come back to him. It was proof that Alicia was still in there, trapped within the prison of her own mind. Theo knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but this small victory gave him the strength to keep going. He would continue to fight for her, to find a way to bring her back, and he was determined to set her free. No matter how long it took, no matter how difficult the journey, Theo would not give up. He would continue to fight for Alicia, to find a way to break through the silence and bring her back to him. For Theo, this was just the beginning of their journey, a journey filled with hope and determination. The word Alcestis was like a key that unlocked a door in Alicia's mind. It was a name she hadn't heard in years, a name that carried with it a weight of forgotten memories and buried secrets. As the name echoed in her thoughts, it was as if a floodgate had opened, releasing a torrent of emotions and recollections that she had long suppressed. More words followed, hesitant at first, then flowing with increasing urgency. Each word was a piece of a puzzle, fragments of a story that had been locked away in the recesses of her mind. The more she wrote, the more the pieces began to fit together, forming a clearer picture of the events that had transpired. She wrote frantically in her sketchbook, pouring out her fragmented memories, her fears, her nightmares. The pages became a canvas for her trauma, each stroke of the pen a desperate attempt to make sense of the chaos that had consumed her life. Her hand moved with a feverish intensity, driven by a need to unearth the truth that lay hidden within her. Theo listened intently, piecing together the puzzle of her past, trying to make sense of the events that led to Gabriel's murder. He knew that every detail, no matter how small, could be the key to unlocking the mystery. His mind raced as he connected the dots, each revelation bringing him closer to understanding the truth. Alicia's account of that night was chilling. Her voice trembled as she recounted the events, her eyes reflecting the horror she had witnessed. She spoke of the fear that had gripped her, the helplessness she had felt as the nightmare unfolded before her. She described a figure breaking into their home, a masked intruder who tied her up and forced her to watch as he confronted Gabriel. The memory was vivid, etched into her mind with a clarity that was both haunting and surreal. She could still hear the intruder's voice, cold and menacing as he issued his threats. She wrote of the gunshots, the blood, the terror that froze her in place. The sound of the gunfire echoed in her ears, a deafening reminder of the violence that had shattered her world. The sight of the blood, stark and crimson, was a constant presence in her nightmares, a symbol of the life that had been brutally taken. She claimed she couldn't remember who the intruder was, her mind blocking out his face. It was as if her memory had erected a barrier, shielding her from the full horror of that night. The details were hazy, fragmented, like pieces of a shattered mirror that refused to come together. But there were inconsistencies in her story, details that didn't add up. Theo couldn't ignore the gaps, the contradictions that seemed to undermine her account. He knew that trauma could distort memories, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than she was letting on. Theo couldn't shake the feeling that Alicia was holding something back, a crucial piece of the puzzle that she was refusing to reveal. He sensed a reluctance in her, a hesitation that hinted at deeper secrets. He wondered what she was afraid of, what truth she was trying to protect. He began to question everything, his certainty wavering as he delved deeper into the labyrinth of her mind. The more he uncovered, the more complex the mystery became. He knew that the answers he sought were buried deep within Alicia's psyche, and he was determined to unearth them, no matter the cost.